So I think just kind of hit these, and really these are open forum discussions. So really encouraging everybody in the group here to speak up with any of your experiences, good, bad, or ugly, to go. But we'll just kind of go top to bottom. So first one here, third-party driver catalogs. Anybody using them in production? And maybe even ask, what they are. What are you using? And any thoughts, good, bad, or ugly, on what you've done with them so far? We'll see if anybody's using them. Or feel free to say you've heard of a friend who's using them.
Mike, what are we using? It's not third party, right? I mean, it's always kind of third party because you're relying on a vendor, but we didn't buy anybody, so.
No, we're just using the catalogs directly from the vendors, being HP and Dell. And then HP's got a really great command line interface that we use to grab that stuff. So that HP is they've made some leaps and bounds in that space. But that's what we do. Gary's a lot of scripting around that. I think he's even got it on some of his blogs too.
I think they were asking about natively in Config Manager console, though, just right alongside your WSUS stuff.
Yep. Yeah, we haven't done any of that yet. I mean, there's kind of pros and cons to it, because the way I see it is, as soon as you get it in that catalog, then how do you handle bare metal machines? Because you can't really use the Windows Update components in Windows PE, for example. I guess if the machine comes up with enough drivers out of the box that it can talk, and then apply the final drivers from Windows Update, might be a good thing, but otherwise you just end up managing them in two locations.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get a feel for how many times people are updating drivers on an already imaged device, right? I mean, I know there's, a 0-day or a security thing comes out on a NIC driver or whatever, right? And those things have to happen. But is anybody proactively trying to keep up with all drivers? I mean, this is kind of an age-old question. I don't know if it's changed, but in my experience in the past, it was always, only do it if you've got to, right? And if there's a performance or security issue, then we have a conversation, kind of thing. But mainly just looking at the image.
We're working on it, Greg, mainly because of regulatory compliance stuff, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many CVEs now that are associated with whether it's drivers or firmware or whatever that has to be kept on top of. So we've been working on something that we can use not only an in-place upgrade, but bare metal and existing machines. Mm-hmm. And then keeping that kind of level set across the environment. Granted, the existing machines, those we'll refer to kind of like as out of band. But going forward, we'll level set the drivers at least once a year during the Win 10 upgrade process. Mm-hmm. But we'll have the capabilities to do the in-between releases or the out-of-band releases in the event that there's a CVE with a video card issue or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but that's part of the thing, is we don't want to be managing those drivers in like 2 or 3 or 4 different locations, right? Because then how do you kind of keep the versions in sync if you're doing some through one method and some through a different method? And so we want all to be out of the same basically bucket, and then have an authoritative source of what our standard versions are supposed to be. So
driver manager is still a mess.
We played a little bit creating a package for Dell command update that could be run as a command line. It's definitely not perfect. It's going to go down to Dell to get the drivers and BIOS updates.
Yep.
But I don't remember I don't know if we just run it once or if we've run it multiple times now, but it did seem to be, pretty successful, other than we probably could have done a better job of warning users that when you reboot your computer, you might see applying BIOS updates don't shut down. But we have way too many models to try. We looked at maybe trying to do the built-in updates, but I think we've got way too many models to try to maintain that.
Yeah. If you don't mind, how do you handle BIOS passwords with that tool? I've tried the same thing.
We don't have BIOS passwords. That's the only way that works.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Anybody else have thoughts on that? BIOS passwords and how you manage doing anything with those? I think some of the tools allow you to run some commands right before and things like that, but curious if anybody's actively doing it. I see Brian says Dell BIOS passwords are easy to set with their tool. Are you able to update BIOS though with those?
I think it's our experience with the HP that you have to have a password to be able to manage the password. So we ended up having to do that initially, and now with the password, we can actually do the BIOS upgrades.
If anybody's got a good article to link to, feel free to post that out here somewhere. But that could probably be a good one. I've been curious. Like I said, I don't get to do it every day anymore, but especially with all the analytics that we're starting to get right and understanding boot times and all those types of things, I'm sure, if somebody's calling a Dell or HP and says, hey, why is my stuff so slow? One of the first questions will be, where is your BIOS up to date, right? Or things like that. So I would think there might be more drive now that we're maybe getting a little more visibility on performance, that people might be more inclined. I know I've resolved several issues just myself with BIOS updates over the years.
I think we've also seen the in-place upgrades to new versions of Windows 10 work better if you've got a current BIOS.
Yeah, that's anybody doing that before they do in-place upgrades? Anybody trying to level set on drivers or anything else?
Well, once we get done with our 1909 upgrade, Greg, I'll be able to report back, because one of the features that we've added to our WAS 1909 is BIOS upgrades, because we're going to level set the BIOS at the same time we do Win 10 upgrades. So we have that all wired in and being tested currently, and also with BIOS password support too.
Oh, nice.
You're doing that first and getting compliance and then doing your upgrade?
Yeah, it'll be done prior to the Win 10 upgrade. Well, at the same time, in the same IPU sequence, we'll just call the Flash BIOS module, and it'll flash it if it's needed, and using secure methods for the BIOS passwords.
How are you handling users from logging in after the BIOS update before the WAS completes?
Well, we typically throw up a nice red screen during the process.
Okay.
So they shouldn't be logging on with that background screen in our WAS process.
You have very polite users.
Actually, no, we don't. They'll do anything. Some of them will. They'll power it off if they've kicked it off, and then they figure out it's going to take a while. We've found some of them last year that just would power the other device off, and then they would say that they didn't kick it off, but we track if it's user invoked or not. So it's like, yeah, you did. Don't lie. We have eyes.
Well, Mike, I think we've got a topic for the next SMUG. You can go over what you did.
The BIOS stuff?
Yeah.
Probably need to do that. Need to blog some of that stuff. Just want to make sure it's fully vetted before we we put it out there so that you guys don't run into issues with it. But yeah, it should work.
We had tested some stuff that Gary blogged on a couple of years ago, and it sort of worked. And I don't know if Raffle's on, who can remember why we have those steps disabled now. I know one of them was we had, in some cases, because the BIOS was so old, we actually had to run it twice to get updated to the current BIOS.
Some of those BIOS updates were very tricky because, yeah, I know in the past there have been some that had dependencies, right? You had to get to this version in order to go to that version. That's just a mess.
Where's the best vendor right now? In regards to BIOS, is it Dell?
We have mostly Dell, so I can't speak to other vendors.
Good question.
Brian, I know on the server side, I despise HP, but
they all still suck. We use all three.
At least they're consistent, right?
Exactly. So I mean, we're trying it. We're trying it the way that Mike is doing it as well. We're trying to push BIOS updates with the in-place update for the OS as well. Delivering that package to the system as a pre-cache, and that content stays on the system while it's actually doing the update. And then we run individual scripts for those BIOS updates during that task sequence. For the most part, that part is actually working fine. It's actually us getting content down to the multiple machines over VPN, and since everybody's going home just like everybody else. So
all right, let's move on. Bulk wiping PCs with NIST compliance. Anybody? I guess what are strategies around wiping PCs these days and staying out of trouble? Yeah, NIST. That's what it was.
Well, Nystrom showed us that you could just get hacked, and that's one way to get wiped quick.
That's true. throw down WannaCrypt or something, right?
So that recommendation was open firewall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Install honeypot. Yeah. Anybody do anything magic wiping? Let's just assume they all are, and we're not going to talk about it. For school, DBAN, license limited.
Yeah, we used to use DBAN on spindle drives.
Killed this.
I actually worry in reverse, right? So I try to think of ways to prevent admins from either making a mistake or they hate the company's guts and they decide they're going to go dark and wipe everybody. So I spend most of my time thinking of ways to prevent that versus how can I actually wipe something on purpose.
Yeah. Bleach bit. Never heard of that one.
I guess I'm more interested in the bulk part of this because we have technicians that, they go around with their DBAN or their Hirons disk and
just a one-off, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing the classroom at a time or something like that. But it'd be nice if you could just, we can do some things, right, through task sequence or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. That would be a nice feature, huh? Just being able to boot into WinPE and wipe the disk.
Are the right-click tools guys still on the phone?
Yeah, that's a good one for them, huh? So, submit a feature request.
But you have to hold a key combination before letting it happen. Otherwise,
yeah, no kidding.
I wiped out the whole network. I'm now looking for a job.
Yeah. That's another story I had where we had a package that this was way back in NT4, did a check disk on a reboot, and somebody re-enabled something in it, and it deployed to all systems. So every system rebooted and ran into a check disk, and even if you powered it off and powered it on, it would still run the check disk to complete. So luckily that wasn't a wipe, but yeah, having a wipe is even bigger. Yeah, two keys to the nuke kind of thing I think you need at that point. There you go, Iron Mountain shredding. Just shred your drives. Okay, let's move on down the list. Autopilot registration options. How are you using Autopilot, and how are you managing registration? I did see where Microsoft announced something with Surface, right, with their devices, I think, where you can like call in to register or something like that. Curious what anybody's doing with your registration for Autopilot. Maybe that's the first question. Anybody using Autopilot right now?
So that was my question, and I was kind of in the process of setting it up. We're currently on 2006 for CM, and we have co-management and tenant attached set up. So the devices are still on-prem AD joined, and they are in Intune. I don't really have anything on the Intune side managing anything, but I'm familiar with the PowerShell tool to grab the hardware ID and upload it. Mm-hmm. But if there's some way where I can leverage my existing infrastructure, all of the devices that are already in Config Manager or something along those lines, and I can do some kind of like a bulk import if all of that information is already in Intune or Config Manager somewhere, and I can just do an import into the Autopilot side, that would be fantastic. But I've not found anybody document anything like that exists. The only thing that I know of is Michael Niehouse's script to do the upload.
So you've got a bunch of machines that are already in Azure Active Directory, and you want to get them enrolled for Autopilot?
No, they're not in Azure Active Directory. They're still on-prem, 80.
Okay, so the easy, I mean, if you're going to use Intune in that data anyways, you're going to use Autopilot. Those devices are going to want to be in Azure AD already anyway. So I would probably just make sure that you have the devices synchronized up to Azure AD, and then you can create a cloud group, put those devices in it, deploy the Autopilot profile to it, and when you deploy the Autopilot profile, you can check a box that says automatically enroll all of these into Autopilot.
Okay, I have all of that. So for clarification, do they have to be Azure AD joined, or can they be registered?
I think that they have to be joined because it's only going to work for company-owned devices.
Right. Okay. So I think that's where that's the sticking point for me yet, because my devices aren't Azure AD joined yet. They're right. That link's not been created. Okay.
That's why my first step was to synchronize those up and make them all hybrid joined devices.
Okay. Do you have a good article on a way to do that, like in an automated sort of fashion?
We just set up all you have to do is set up the Azure AD Connect tool and have it synchronize your devices. And it's going to automatically convert all of your devices into hybrid, assuming that they're a supported Windows 10 operating system.
Right. So that would be a hybrid Azure AD joined. But I know that there's some caveats to using that in other areas of the system. Is there a way to go to automatically just go to AD joined? Or I'm sorry, Azure AD joined?
If you wanted to be Azure AD joined and not hybrid joined, you would have to remove them from your on-premise Active Directory.
Gotcha. And is there a way to automate? I mean, obviously, I know you can go into like the accounts tab inside of Windows and sign in that way and do an Azure AD join. Is there a way to do that in like a bulk fashion or an automated way?
I'm sure there is, just because it'd be handled similar to the way you would do any domain migration. Right, if you're going to migrate a bunch of devices from one domain to another, it would be handled the same way. I haven't personally done that in a number of years. So if I was, I don't want to give you the ways that I used to do it. So I don't have a good answer for the best way to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I saw a post or two about some DoD wiping. It might be interesting read there. Looks like somebody was doing it with OSD with SDelete. Oh, part of their system kernel suite.
Why is there a shared server?
Who shared server? Okay, SDelete. Oh, it says fails quite often, huh, Brian? All right. Yeah, you would think Microsoft would have come up with something where you could, punch a registry key and reboot and just destroy your OS in a way that's a NIST. All right, good to know we all still have some challenges there.
Realistic.
That tool in the desktop and recovery toolkit that did a secure wipe, I think. I forget what it was called. See if I can find it.
I think that was more like disk erase versus like an instant wipe that people kind of seem to want.
Apologies for only half paying attention. I've got everybody's working from home, right? So everybody's expecting us. But if your devices are encrypted, all you have to do is, realistically, I would think, is to trigger the device to go into tamper mode, right? The drive, the BitLocker.
Yeah, and would the TPM clear also do that?
What's that?
Would the TPM clearing also do the same thing?
I would expect it would. I can't speak from experience, but I mean, if that was a requirement from one of my customers, that's the direction that I would try first, right? Because that you could send that from that command. You should be able to send a command like that from anything, right? PowerShell script. You wouldn't even need to transfer. You shouldn't even need to transfer a package of any kind to be able to trip the Windows OS into tamper mode.
Yeah, it might be interesting to, because I remember talking about DoD wipes and NIST compliance. I don't know what those things actually show these days, but yeah, can you just clear the TPM and that just screws it all up? I'd be curious what's sufficient from a NIST or DoD type of thing. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I remember the old days talking about 7-pass minimum, writing every sector or whatever on a disk. Yeah, just be curious. Somebody should have an easy button for how to do this in a way that's acceptable for NIST or DoD. All right. If anybody comes up with one, it sounds like we're due for a blog post on how to make that happen.
And it does seem now with SSDs that SSD manufacturers have something that they certify for their SSDs, but I don't know that there's anything universal for all SSDs.
Interesting.
So Dell now in the BIOS has something that you can, at least wipe the drive, but I don't know that that meets NIST requirements either.
Okay, let's move down the list here. We got anything for OSD. If anybody has any specific burning questions, feel free to bring those up. Otherwise, we'll keep heading down the list here.
So I do have one, but I put that in there, because I couldn't think of anything specific at the time. And we may have a niche issue that not very many organizations have. We do a lot of our imaging off of flash drives, and we've been using a driver solution called the Universal Imaging Utility. It creates this gigantic 32 gigabyte package. And because it's a generic, it's not specific enough. So we've been looking at Maurice's modern driver management. I could swear that it's, at MMS last year, when we actually had a physical MMS, that somebody said you could still use that and you would put something in your offline media that would still go call the admin service and download the right drivers. But I sure can't find any documentation of that. I wonder if anybody's tried that at all.
So a real-time,
or even, well, originally my thought was, there's a step when you're building offline media where you can tell it additional packages to download. And that's what I thought we would use, but you need something to tell the machine, for the machine to figure out which of those driver packages it needs to install.
I ran into the same problem, and what I started doing was I started using OSD deploys OSD drivers, and what that does is you get rid of all the video and audio drivers, and you make a base model family pack. It shrinks down the drivers from easily 78 gigs to about 8 gigs, and basically keeps them all in nice and neat little cabs that extracts itself and puts it in a known folder, and you just do a PNP util collection on that and it'll add the drivers. So I use that as my base install, and then I have the machines go and talk to SSCM and grab drivers, more drivers later on, the video, the audio, the big hitters, you know?
Okay, that was
I also use OSD drivers, but you can also use DISM to inject those drivers during WinPE if you're building a machine from bare metal.
I
don't even bother with the video and audio drivers because the inbox stuff is generally good enough, and that just saves even more space and time.
Yeah, you can also use OSD Builder for that exact same case. Slipstream the drivers into the image before you even upload it to SSCM.
Yeah, I just shared here on the screen a hack that I did way back to 2012, where basically you put a special set of drivers or in a folder on your USB, and then you just build your task sequence to look for that folder, and if it exists, just run the PNP to plug them all in. This is what we did for inside of Dell. There's a lot of people that you're running with prototype, or you don't want to install the standard set of drivers. So we put the right logic in the task sequence to basically skip driver injection if this folder exists, and if so, then just apply them there. So old school, if you go to my blog and search for drivers, you'll find it there. Basically just a runtime injection.
Copy that into the chat.
Another old school hack that still works somehow is, a lot of the manufacturers will provide you with a cab file that you can use for a certain model or something. And you can unpack that cab into the Windows INF folder, just dump it in there, and Windows PNP will find it on its own on its first run.
It's good to know.
A new thing I just found in Gary Block's WAS image is he's downloading drivers dynamically in the task sequence from the vendor. So I don't know if we can use that in your standalone image. I think you can, because it's just going out to the internet. That might help you as well, and it'll be the latest drivers at that point.
Yeah, just got to be able to reach the internet during that time.
Yeah, which is we used to tell people, don't plug in the network card because we'd get other funky things happening, but we may have to plug into the network to use some of these other things. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, any other burning OSD questions? No? All right, let's move on down. Triggering application deployment over REST API. I looked to see if Adam Gross was here somewhere. I've seen a little bit here, right? Because there's two ways that REST can work. One is making WMI calls. I would like to think that, the art of the possible is there. I don't think I've done it myself. I did some tests with collection creation or adding a device, but I never went further than that. Curious if anybody doing anything over REST today, and specifically, I guess if anybody has experience with application deployment. Nope, not yet. Sounds like. I think being able to make the WMI calls. I think we're getting there. I don't know if it works just yet, but I bet it does. I just haven't gone out there to try it yet. I think maybe somebody might have asked that back when Adam was around and he talked about it, but I haven't seen a blog on it or anything yet. Upgrading CM. I know we talked a little bit about that in the coffee talk, and maybe with Brian that might have happened a little bit as well. But any other burning questions there, or specific things you wanted to talk about? Nothing. Okay.
Is everybody on 2006 now? Except for the person that asked about upgrading earlier today.
Yeah. Yeah, we can include number 10 here, right? How's it going? How is 2006 going for you?
Yeah,
we
I
are
was gonna
not.
say, Brian answered a lot of the questions I had, so.
Yeah, we're not, Mike. We're still on O2. We're having problems with Config Manager right now, though. That's the main reason why, because the last 2 or 3 upgrades we did, they took probably about 18 hours.
Ooh,
because something's happened in our database where crap just stops. And so we're not doing it this time, and we're waiting for some help. Right now, looking at my server, CPU usage is at about 97%. So we got some stuff to work on. Yeah.
So can I just ask about, like, I mean, do you let another team manage your SQL for you, or does your team manage it?
That's a great question. So
there's nobody.
No simple answer there, huh?
There is no simple answer because our config manager has been handed down for the last I don't know, decade. Obviously, since we put it in probably 07 or whatever, and several teams had it, and now my team's got it. And then over the time of me having it for the past 4 years, we have gotten more and more permissions to where we actually we update and maintain our own servers now, but the SQL database is on a SQL server, and it's a SQL Enterprise server. So we have that to contend with. And our server team's really good about things. We just don't know what the problem is. And it's funny because I had Michael look at it, and he's still scratching his head over in Sweden over this thing. So yeah.
I mean, generally, slow performance is not fast enough disk I/O. Maybe you are sharing your instance with like a dozen, 2 dozen other people. CM is not like a share friendly kind of thing. If you're going to be the busy guy in the room, it's kind of like being the loud VM on a host, and everybody's like, "Who am I stuck with?" You're going to be the worst player in there, and so are they optimizing for you in terms of CM getting enough temp DB size, enough growth size on your files, on multiple files? Are they really paying attention to you, or are you just like one of many and you're never going to have a good experience?
Well, that's a great question, Brian, because honestly, I don't think we communicate enough with them until we see something like this happening. Because when stuff's working, I'm not actively monitoring the database. I stick in the console, and I'm on the server maintaining all of that. But yeah, I don't do enough with the database or communicating with them. I do know that when we had a real big problem, we actually had to call in Kent, and he was like, "Oh my God, your settings are so wrong." So we did a huge adjustment about 18-20 months ago, and everything was working. And now over the last, like I said, for sure, over the last 3 upgrades, it has been a nightmare where it stalls out. We actually have to reboot the server. We reboot the entire server 3 times to get the update to continue.
Dear Lord. So I'll bet you anything. I mean, Kent looked at it. He knows the stuff on growth rates and such. I'll guarantee you they backed off that, and someone thought like, why is this server hogging all the space? And at any moment in time, they might have looked at you and thought, oh, he's not busy. I can trim this back. And they did that, and they didn't tell you. And they burned you alive on SQL, because you really have to have fast disk and lots of I/O and lots of files, all optimized to be able to grow as needed. A great temp DB able to grow as needed, and the fastest transaction log in the world. And when they skimp, and they might have looked at you at a point in time on a weekend or just a simple time where you weren't very busy, and they thought, oh, screw this, I can reclaim all these resources, and they did. I guarantee you're going to find something like that out.
Okay, I will put the ask in now to be, politically correct when I'm doing it, right? Thanks, Brian.
That's a good one. Anybody else around 2006 or upgrading CM?
I just looked. We haven't done 2006 yet. But
this Tuesday.
I'm curious if anybody, what's your cadence now for updating CM? Is it every single time, once a year? Like Brian says, keep up is the best, but.
We typically wait for the first hotfix roll up because we got burned on one of the earlier ones. It's in like 16 or 17.
It's not a bad idea, so long as you're staying current, right? So like, still, if you're still doing it 3 times a year, you're still current. It's just that you're just lagging, and it's actually a smart routine. I used to go fast ring, and I got burnt, and we now go slow. You could twist my arm pretty easily to say I could wait until the hotfix roll up comes, because, dear Lord, you read the list of fixes and you wonder how the pilot junk ever worked. But guess what? You can do the same thing for SQL too.
It seems like they're pretty quick on those roll-ups or the fixes as well, right? I mean, I haven't
Until you're the one having the pain, and it's just like every day you're looking and begging for them to release it.
True. Kind of like slow-moving software, right? It's when you're, it's only when you're not looking does it fly.
Generally, we do find that, every single update does come with we're going to need a hot fix at some time. Does a hot fix roll up fix everything? Not necessarily. But generally, it's your safest bet to try. It's the best part is if you do it, just at least do that, and then you're still staying current. You're just lagging. Lagging's fine. Not staying current is bad.
Fail forward.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point, Brian. Because I don't really get to toss this out to the wider audience, but I'm not sure if anybody else is seeing resource objects not getting merged. So basically, when a device gets rebuilt or reimaged, hardware ID is the same and everything else, but CM isn't merging the resource ID, and we're seeing that. We've seen it quite consistently. You've seen it too, Paul, okay? I've had a case open with Microsoft for about 6 months on this now, and we're no closer to finding what the problem is. We've seen it on 1910, we've seen it on 2002, and now on 2006.
That makes a mess, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay.
I go in and delete duplicates every once in a while and try to figure it. A lot of times I can delete the new one that got created, and it eventually will match up with the old one, the original one. Fortunately, there's not a ton of them, but every once in a while.
How about the way to a passwordless environment using CM?
Yeah. How?
How? Yeah. So, I'm aware of 2 companies that have, kind of due to those rings, kind of like what Michael Nystrom was showing earlier, that have had to split configman environments into rings as well, especially when you're doing data center management, things like that. Just curious, tied to that, right, and how you manage those kind of things, or do you have forbidden rings, and how are those managed? There's a lot around this that, there's a bigger eye on things like configman now, I think, than there was before. So curious if you're experiencing those and maybe how that ties into passwordless environments. Nothing. All right.
In general, the scripts node can, I used to have an account that was local admin on all machines. I don't need that anymore with the scripts node. I got rid of it. I actually don't have that account. It's gone. And because I can use the scripts node and hit any machine, mostly just for looking, never really to make changes, but I need to go poke about and look, and the scripts node lets me do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly simplifies. Let's see. Client health often have machines that aren't checking in or won't run required deployments, including patches. I'm curious on client health, just what people are seeing, because we used to have several sessions talking about this, and I know configman team was focused on this for a while, but I really haven't heard anything in the last probably a year or two, but like I said, I'm not as close to it, but just curious what other people are seeing in this space. Still broken
Definitely gotten
WMI?
better over time, but there's still always some machines that need intervention, but
Yeah.
far fewer than there used to be.
People still running like the client health startup scripts from Sandy's and things like that? Is that,
Yes,
you
we
know,
are.
yeah. So you might be fixing, are you looking to see how many things that is fixing, or kind of black box, as long as it's fixing it, nobody really cares?
Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine most people are like that, right? If you've got those processes in place, then you're, you know, remediating your problem and you don't have to deal with it, but maybe there's still an underlying thing that just there, but nobody, it's less priority, right? Because you've got to work around for it.
Yeah, we've just had consistent issues lately with either clients not reporting in at all, showing offline, not showing recent user information, not running deployments until you get in there and manually check, or you know, even rebooting the machine doesn't always help. But you know, it's making our upgrades and everything just dog slow.
So it's really just clients that just stopped like getting policy or things, right? They're just kind of sitting there.
And they're inconsistent too. It's like sometimes it'll show, okay, yeah, the client last had a heartbeat, say yesterday or something, but it shows that it's offline and it doesn't show a current user, and it hasn't run any deployments that were pushed out as required ASAP, you know, a week ago. But I can ping it and I can remote into it, and oh crap, there's somebody logged on. Better get back off.
Interesting.
And it's just it's like it's partially there. And the WMI stuff I remember seeing on some older server OS versions, but I don't really remember seeing much about that with Windows 10.
Yeah, a lot of these, if I trigger a client reinstall from the console, that fixes them. Not all, but a lot of them.
That does fix a lot of them, yeah. We've had some where you got to manually get into the machine somehow to completely remove it and then reboot and then reinstall from the SMS setup or CM setup, whatever it is. And then that gets it going. There's some remnants either in the registry or file remnants somewhere that just the right-click reinstall client from the console doesn't take care of.
Yeah, and I take the back. Yeah, and I have done that. I've used PowerShell remote to go in and run the CCM setup uninstall and ask the user to reboot and then install again.
So I'm assuming that as you've been upgrading ConfigMan, you're still upgrading your clients and things like that. So it's just still health issues kind of carrying on that you still struggle with, right?
Yeah, we typically promote the client within a couple hours of finishing the upgrade, because you know we'll just test to make sure Software Center and all that stuff's working, and then we'll go ahead and promote the client. But of course, that takes forever because I've recently learned that the client won't upgrade until it's in a maintenance window, which we don't have that many of.
No, it will upgrade in the time frame that you give it to. So if ACU is set for like a week, it won't upgrade for a week. But if you have a maintenance window, it will upgrade during the maintenance window.
We do have some maintenance windows, and we typically set the upgrade to like a day or something like that, so that it'll upgrade as many as it can over the weekend, because that's when we do our upgrades, is on weekends. But like we'll come in on Monday and we'll have 30 or 40 clients that actually updated to the new client.
Well, does everybody have some sort of maintenance window? Is that what you're saying? Or just some machines have a maintenance window?
All of our workstations have maintenance windows.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so they absolutely, you could set that thing to 30 days or 1 day. It won't matter. They will not, well, actually it does. They won't install until the maintenance window is open. After, let's say you set it for 7 days. During that first 7 days, anytime a maintenance window opens up, then they'll go and upgrade if they can, right? They will upgrade. If the maintenance window is 7 days is gone and they never had a maintenance window in there, then what happens is it goes to a 24-hour schedule of just keep retrying on its own. But the stupid thing will always respect a maintenance window. And the only way, if you want to get around that, and you're really confident that the client works great, is put it in the pilot the pilot doesn't use a maintenance window and it goes immediately.
So put like my all workstations collection into the client pilot collection.
When you do it in the pilot, it goes within the hour. So if you have a 60-minute refresh cycle on policy, an hour later, you're going to come out the other side and they're all going to be upgraded. That might be kind of aggressive for you. So you could feed them into that pilot. So you can do like half today and half tomorrow or whatever you wanted to do. But the pilot's instant and it doesn't use a scheduled task. It just goes now, just says, let's do it. And I don't care about a maintenance.
I like that. And that doesn't matter whether or not you've promoted the client. You can just go ahead and stick them in there.
No, because it's called the pre-production client, so you don't have to promote yet.
Yeah.
So it's because you're testing, right? I'm just saying, test in production.
Cool.
Do your network guys like you?
Yeah, we haven't had any major disagreements, and I didn't even ask when I turned on LEDBAT on some new DPs. They haven't said anything either, so.
I'm just thinking when you make all your clients update, you might want to watch the bandwidth on that.
Thankfully, we've only got about 3,000 clients worldwide, and so they're pretty well spread out, and we've got DPs in all our major offices as well to help distribute that load.
So remember that little spot, if you remember 80,000 hours ago when I did my session, I brought up branch cache, and AC will use branch cache, so you can just take down it's just SIPs, and Mike's typing it in there too. So it'll only use just what I can remember. It's not the whole 200 megs. It's like 30 megs to pull, so it's not loud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably the biggest offenders would be our VDI farm, but
that would be
a little over
one.
1,000.
Okay. But that's where you could burn yourself. So that one might be one where you want to, if like you're worried about the maintenance window, use the maintenance window on them probably first and foremost. Just let ACU naturally do it. But if it's not going fast enough for you, you could trickle those guys in, 100 every hour, 2 hours or something like that. But a VDI is exact kind of scenario where you'd want it to kind of slow roll out a bit.
Cool. Thanks for the info, guys. I'll see if I can take another look at WMI health on these broken ones. Although the fact that doing the complete uninstall of the client and then reinstalling it manually rather than through the console fixes it tells me it's probably not WMI,
huh? WMI is a strange beast. Yeah.
I haven't had WMI issues since Windows XP, mostly a little bit in 7 and nothing in 10.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. Old server OS is 2003, 2008.
Yeah, unless you got other things that are messing with, WMI in some weird way as well, right? I mean, maybe there's something else that's screwing it up. Yeah, I'd be curious, but it does sound like, it sounds like enough people are still having client health issues, generally speaking. It would be nice if we could get some better view of that. Anybody not having? It sounds like, Brian, you guys aren't seeing it as a big issue or a pandemic of WMI health, right? Or just client health in general, right? We probably all get the 1 or 2% or whatever, but I'm curious.
It's not even 1%. Ours is ridiculously small. I do point out, we actually even have something called a client health team. I don't know what they do all day because they got their own idea on what they think is a bad client. But to me, the console is always trying to tell me what's bad. It'll tell you, hey, these guys are failing CCM eval, and these guys actually failed remediation. I would start there first. But if you go by those numbers, honestly, I don't think we ever hit over 100, and we got like 400 plus thousand clients, right? So
yeah,
I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we got a pretty good startup script, and that takes care of most of our issues.
I honestly think upgrading the client frequently probably eliminates a lot of those as well. It was always, to me, it was the older clients that were always the problem. So if you're not getting older client versions, then you're that refresh of a client upgrade seems to help me out as well. At least in the past, it did. So for you guys, Brian, you've got your startup script. So does that eventually catch anybody that didn't get automatically upgraded through ACU?
Yep.
Yeah.
Also, it does a whole bunch of other checks, make sure that WMI and stuff. We do some quick, easy WMI call, that kind of thing, see if that's working. I haven't looked at it in a long time, but we do some basic health checks in it to see that it's working fine, and that you're up to date. So if you're old and somehow you did slip through ACU or you didn't get to where something was busted, we'll still just force upgrade you on that.
Yeah.
And then we even recently kind of moved off, and I'm not as sure I'm a fan of this, although I came up with the idea, was that for laptops, we like to use a scheduled task. So we do a startup script, but all that does is create a scheduled task that runs another script later on. So that way we can catch you as like a laptop that recurs, so that the startup script is recurring whether or not you're online or off, or whether or not you can reach us because of GPO,
Yeah.
you know, horse and cart thing. It's a two-pronged thing. It's kind of ugly. Now I got a scheduled task all over the place that feels dirty as hell. That is actually a precursor to CCM eval. So that idea is something I brought to Microsoft a billion years ago, and they took it and ran with it and invented CCM eval.
Yep.
Which does those constant checks.
Yep. I wonder, I'm curious just from the group here. I mean, I wonder if we could get Microsoft to just give us kind of a client health overview and feedback type of session, right? Maybe they can talk about what they're, all the things that you might be familiar with or only halfway and forgotten, right? Around CCM eval and, the reports they have, and maybe just get some feedback from the group. Throw a yes in if you think that would be good to revisit. We haven't had one of those in a while, so yeah, okay.
Sorry, right. Out of curiosity, has anybody got good offloading procedures? I mean, through SSCM or otherwise? I mean, a lot of the time when I'm looking into health issues, it turns out the computer has been decommissioned and put out of our inventory database hasn't been updated. Have you guys got any procedures that you do to help along with that, to alleviate that kind of issue?
So devices are decommissioned and you just never knew. So they just start to show as aging devices in configman, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, a script that disables in Active Directory, I think
we have
60 days since last login. And that will help speed up them dropping out of the database. But you're right. So, I'm looking at although I'm looking at I haven't looked at this in a while, the client health dashboard, and it's by default, it's only looking at clients active in the last 3 days. So I look actually pretty good. Well, maybe not perfect, but 98.55 for the last 3 days. I'm sure if I go longer, it'll be lower than that.
Okay. Very good. Good conversation. So we'll talk here for a couple more minutes. We're officially on our break, but maybe we'll go 5 more and then take a 5. But you guys do a break wherever we want. I'm curious. I see Nintendo. Did somebody have a reason for Nintendo? I can't think of the punchline around it. So maybe there's something there, something new with Nintendo that I'm not aware of.
Maybe they want to manage their child's device from the console.
I thought 3DS Nintendo stopped with. I'm not sure what that means. But, not manufacturing 3DSs anymore. Back to I haven't done gaming in a while, so I haven't kept up. I did have a Wii. That was my last gaming thing, for the record. So that's the last one that I ever had. All right, moving on. We talked about CM 2006, Apple Watches. I saw something the other day about Apple Watches and what oxygen sensors built into them, but that's the only cool thing that I've heard recently on Apple Watches. Anybody else got anything cool they want to chat about or bring up there? I don't think we can manage them yet. Nope, nothing else cool there. And we've talked a little bit about managing and deploying drivers. That's probably another one, just driver management strategies. It might be good, another one, right, to get another position from Microsoft, other than they don't have one. We'll see what they say, but just to, maybe that's another feedback session. I know there've been conversations in the past on those as well, but sounds like it continues to be a challenge that we all want some improvement on. Okay, anything else here before we take a 8 or 9 minute break? Anything you'd like to add? Managing watchOS.
Anybody having issues with like NVIDIA drivers that now rely on AppX apps? And if you have, how do we fix that, especially if we're locking down the App Store to a business app store?
I think we ended up approving something for our business app store for that.
Yeah, there's a few cases where I couldn't even approve it, and I'm just wondering, side loading, is that a possibility in task sequences in the future? Or loading an AppX while doing the OSD image.
We're all stumped.
Yeah.
Let us know when you figure it out.
Yeah.
Anybody doing side loading? I remember several years ago, right when the functionality first came around. I don't know. Is anybody doing any side loading today? That'd be another interesting.
Not since we got a business store, no.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Yeah, how many people need and use that feature today?
I was starting to look into it because of this Dell touchpad and whatever else, because they weren't. Our organization blocks the store 6 ways from Sunday, and so business store isn't an option for us. And trying to get an app into CM isn't an option because Dell won't make it available separate, or the Alps touchpad company, or whoever. So there was something else too, not just the Waves Max audio. There was, I'm trying to remember what the other one was, but yeah, the apps that are needed for drivers is the main push for that, I believe.
If you guys wouldn't mind emailing me shamelessly, I'd love to go hit our product group and at least give them some feedback. I used to know more people there than I do now, but I'd love to give some of that feedback to make sure that they're aware and see if they have any thoughts on it. Because yeah,
we were definitely stuck until we finally got somebody to give us a business store.
You don't need to allow the endpoints to access the business store. You just need to connect the business store to your config manager, and then you can download the app and then deploy it without.
If there's a download, yeah, sure.
If there's a download, yeah, that's the
well,
problem.
if it's in the store,
it's not always in the business store.
No.
It's not always in the business store.
That's the piece we can't get yet, is being able to link the business store to config manager.
Yeah. I think that was the Realtek drivers were one of the worst offenders. You basically couldn't get the app at all in the business store, and basically the consumer store was the only place it was available.
Interesting. Okay, let's finish up with one more. Stephen, I see you put one in. I think I missed it earlier about changing Azure tenant and standing up a new one. What do I need to know about O365 license activating? I don't know if you want to add any more color to that one, or.
So we're changing to a new tenant, and the thing I'm concerned about is all the computers that have their license activated on the current tenant. Are they just going to change over automatically without any user interface when we hybrid join the new tenant? Or is there going to be some 90-day and then I have to tell the thing to clear out its licenses?
Anybody got any experience there?
I'm sorry. Well, I'm here now. You were saying you're going to migrate users from one tenant to a new tenant?
Correct. Our company changed the name, and so they want a new tenant with a new name.
Okay.
And Microsoft doesn't have any way to change the name.
No. So I mean, they're going to basically be logging into a new, like a computer or a new device that's
their current device.
Their current device, but I'm guessing you are changing the Active Directory sync to the new tenant?
Correct.
That device isn't registered to the old tenant right now?
It is.
It's a little bit of a doozy.
Let us know how you figured out, Steve.
Well, someone just put in a link. I think this is probably the script that I currently run for my troubleshooting, which is I basically clear off the license. Yeah, this is the script that I've been using for troubleshooting issues, but if I'm going to have to do this on 5,000 computers, that's fun. Because it's also a per user, if I remember correctly.
Well, sorry we don't have any better answers, but yeah, Steve, it sounds like something that we'd be curious on. So feel free if you make progress to share it back with us at the next meeting.
Okay.